and always enjoy talking to Scott Braun, who does a fantastic job covering baseball as well. And you can catch them cover the American League Division Series throughout MLB's network, their coverage of the 2018 postseason. Just visit MLBnetwork.com for your local channel listings. I know you've got your coffee. I know you got your stats. I know you got your box scores. I know you got your notes. I'm just going to wind you up and away we go. How you been, my friend?
Hey, Rich. I'm great. I'm amped up, obviously. It's like you just have to keep looking back. And you don't want to do the history thing with Yankees Red Sox because none of these players were
remember
there.
Right,
obviously. But the fact that they haven't met up in a big series like this since 2004 does make the anticipation very high.
Well, we'll get to that series in a couple moments. I want to get a little focus on that as well. But how about the Brewers last night, right? We talk about their bullpen being one of the best in the NL, and then you cough up the 2-run lead, and then the veteran Moustakas comes through. To me, I think the Brewers are sneaky good, and I'm telling you, I think if there's one team I thought from the NL going in that can maybe make that deep run, I think it's Milwaukee.
Yeah, I think Milwaukee's a special team. I mean, they're very talented offensively. Obviously, they didn't put up a ton of runs yesterday, and also for anyone that says, oh, that bullpen strategy didn't work because you need everybody to be clicking, and Jeremy Jeffress didn't play well or didn't pitch well. Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, that's just like in a regular game if the closer blew the game. And also, hey, holding a team to 2 runs, I'll take that for the entire postseason. So it worked for them yesterday. Curious to see how Jhoulys Chacín goes in Game 2 for them today because he's going on short rest. He's never done that before. I still get a little concerned just with the fact that they're essentially not going to rely, or what, they're going to rely on one starter.
Right.
If this is going to be the case for the entire postseason. I'm fine with it in the first round. It's just, are they going to be able to get through the entire postseason victorious with this format? I don't know. Like, will they wear down Josh Hader? Will they wear down Jeffress, who might have some issues already? He was not available for the previous game, that game's 163. And then Knable's there, and he's been really good, and so is Soria. But wouldn't you be concerned about that? Like Hader, for example, he's had a few times this year where you're like, maybe they're getting slightly overused with him. And they should ease back. So I'm just wondering, like, I know you get days off in the postseason, so you can take advantage of this, but it is the same 3 or 4 guys that they're going to look at a lot in the playoffs.
I think that's always an issue. I really do. And I understand we're at a point right now with baseball where managers, the way we always talk about the analytics and the way they're thinking is when it comes to the starting rotation or the relief or the bullpen and guys they want to throw out there. I think there's always a concern with that. Always. I mean, like, for instance, I was a little surprised that the Dodgers didn't go with Kershaw in Game 1. And listen, I understand he's the veteran guy. He wants to ball, and he seems to be okay. But to me, he's probably a little miffed, but it worked out for you. I just think if they were to fell behind 2-1, then you're forced to throw him out there in Game 4. But, you know, it's just sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. The managers seem to know more than we do, and they have a plan, and they stick with it.
So I've learned a few things. And so I was on Cleveland radio station, The Fan, yesterday, and we were talking about this Kershaw not going until Game 2, because last year, remember, Corey Kluber goes in Game 2. And the key quote that I took from last year was when Terry Francona said he's fighting some things. That meant Kluber was kind of hurt, and he looked hurt. He didn't look the same when he was on the mound. So with Kershaw, I'm not necessarily saying that he has a significant injury at the moment, but he's had back issues all year. He's much better on the extra day of rest. I think they recognize that. And I think they also look at him with the velocity down. He's using his off-speed stuff a lot more, which isn't the worst thing. The results are still pretty much there, but he's not the same Clayton Kershaw. I mean, he's not throwing 94, 95. He's throwing about 90. So with all that being said, Walker Buehler has better stuff than him right now, and Hyun-Jin Ryu is on such a roll and pitching well at home. So I think they added it all up and said, you know what, Clayton Kershaw at home right now, or Clayton Kershaw with the extra rest right now is going to make a difference. So let's go with that. And the risk obviously paid off for them so far.
I love what the Braves did this year because, you know, we have such a focus in our backyard with the NL East, with the Phillies, obviously, and then the Mets, and then down 95 with the Nationals. And I thought the Braves were going to be a competitive team. I thought they can contend for that second wild card. And at the end of the day, they just put together a little more of a streak. The Phillies started to implode with Kapler. The arms got tired. The offense went south, and the Braves took advantage of it. But they replenished their farm system. They got a bunch of prospects. They're young enough to maybe not understand the moment, so maybe you're playing a little loosey-goosey. But I think at the end of the day, whether they win the series or not, that's a team going forward. You know, they're going to be a tough out in the NL East.
Yeah, and I mean, last night, obviously, you know, some players that hadn't been playing a big stage like that, so they were, I think, swinging a little bit too aggressively against Ryu. You got to be patient. A lot of those pitches were not in the zone, and then Foltynewicz didn't have his fastball command, and you can you can put nerves to that too. But the Braves are the scariest team in the division for the long term right now, because so look at 2 out of the 3 starters in their top 3 in this postseason series. So yesterday was Fulton Ebich, but you have Anibal Sanchez and Kevin Gausman. I mean, those are not 2 of their like top level pitching prospects that they have 10 of in their minor league system, and some of them are on the playoff roster right now, like say a Touki Toussaint or Sean Newcomb, who we saw in relief role yesterday. That's just telling you that the best is yet to come for them. I mean, Anibal Sanchez was cut by the Twins this year. Kevin Gausman was pitching terribly for the Orioles for the past year and a half or so. So that tells you how special they're going to be, because we've been looking forward to their pitching for a long time, and they still have like 6, 7, 8 arms to come. So yeah, I think they're by far the scariest team. The only thing that makes, Philadelphia has a lot of work to do. The thing that makes them scary is that they haven't spent money for years, and they're usually a top-level spender, so they're going to spend a ton. They could buy like half the big names that we're talking about for the offseason. Mets are obviously going to stick with their pitching. You know what I think? The Nationals, they spend money too. I don't think that Bryce Harper's coming back. I don't think they should re-sign Bryce Harper. And I think the Nationals, with the ability to spend on some starting pitching, they might make the playoffs next year without Harper, with Juan Soto and Victor Robles, Michael Taylor and Adam Eaton in the outfield. I know Harper's a big deal, but I think they can better allocate the resources. So the division was down this year, but I think it's going to be good starting really next year.
One more quickie with the NL East on the Phillies. I'm curious to get your take on this from a national perspective. A lot of fans, I felt it would have been a knee-jerk reaction if the Phillies would have fired Kapler, because I think they exceeded expectations. Midway through the season, we were talking about him, potential NL Manager of the Year. Nola came into his own. Maybe they didn't give you the numbers on the return investment that they wanted with Arrieta and Santana. They made some moves. They have a ton of money, as we alluded to, so they swung and missed. Many teams did on Machado. You can still spend. You can go after Harper. You got 2019. A lot of the fans were calling for Kapler's head, and Klintak came down and he defends Kapler, and Kapler defends these guys, and it seems as though they've got each other's back. But I think the issue is that there is somewhat of a detachment from the team to the fan base. And then Klintak comes out and basically says in so many words, to paraphrase, kind of be patient this offseason, which tells me they're going to go through another offseason where they're not going to spend the money, where they have the resources, as you mentioned, to spend the money. And I'm just trying, you got building blocks. Maybe you got Hoskins, maybe you got Nola. I don't know what they're going to do with Franco. I don't know what they're going to do with Herrera. I don't know what they're going to do with Alfaro. But I thought overall it would have been a knee-jerk reaction to fire the manager, because then you're a rudderless franchise.
Here's my thing with the Phillies this year. They had one of the worst offenses. They had one of the worst defenses.
Yep.
And yet still they were hanging around in the playoff race for a long time. So I think, and watching many Phillies games, like inning by inning, that Gabe Kapler did a really good job after that first week or so of in-game managing. Sometimes he took some risks, but I think a lot of them paid off for him. So I think you have to give more credit to him than what's due. I mean, this isn't a playoff roster yet. It's not. So, no. And also they messed themselves up. I crushed the Carlos Santana signing last year. Absolutely annihilated it all off season long. I said, forget about what you think Carlos Santana is going to be. I didn't even need to do player evaluation. I was like, you're moving Rhys Hoskins back to the outfield. You can hear from him, super nice guy. It didn't sound like he wanted to be out there.
He didn't.
Doesn't have a lot of confidence out there. He looked, I love Rhys, but he doesn't fit out there. It doesn't work for him. So now they're going to have to clean up that mess and bring him back to first base. And obviously him and Aaron Nola are the franchise cornerstone. So I don't know what you're going to do with that, because I don't know who's taking Carlos Santana. Maybe they'll take him, 10 cents on the dollar, but they have a lot of roster construction to do. I take the comment from Klintak too is, I think it's obvious every Phillies fan wants to see Mike Trout in Philadelphia. The good news for them is that I think they might be able to find out if it's going to be realistic or not. The Angels are going to talk to him, I would say within a month or so, about a contract extension. They'll have a very good indication of if he wants to be there or not, because they'll offer him the world. And if he says no and he wants to see how things play out, to me that means he's leaving. So he's either taking huge money and going to be an Angel for life or not. So this is a good thing for the Phillies, because they're going to find out right now. Because in my mind, if Trout says no to the contract extension, which will be the biggest by far ever we've seen in any sport, if he says no, that means he wants to see how things play out, probably, or maybe has an inclination that he wants to go to Philadelphia. So then you might see the Angels actually field trade offers. Not that they'd necessarily do a deal right there with Philly, but it's just a good sign for them, and that could be what they're saving up money for. I still think they're going to spend a lot this offseason too. I really do. I think they're going to try and be competitive and be a playoff team regardless next year. It's just that good news for them is they'll find out about Trout. And I think much like last year where we're waiting for dominoes to fall, that might be the first domino where we find out if Trout accepts an extension offer or not. And then a lot of other things can happen after that. Because if Mike Trout is suddenly available, I mean, half the teams in the league are going to be trying for that before they go for any free agents.
Scott, kind of squash this narrative or notion for me, because I've been saying this to the fan base as well and the listeners and the callers. I don't believe for 1 minute if Kapler is or isn't the manager, it's gonna affect potential free agents coming in. I think if they see that you got a passionate fan base, you have a good sports city, you got a pretty much a sandbox there if you're a slugger, and if you think this team's on the rise and the money's there, you're going to sign. Everyone's been calling up saying, how are you going to attract free agents here with Gabe Kapler as the manager?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. I really don't. I mean, for just as much as it would be a problem for another player that just happens to not get along or not see eye to eye with a certain manager, I don't think he stands out in that regard. I think people thought that it was going to be that way a lot more than it actually was. I mean, I actually got to spend a lot of time with him in before our games. So our manager meetings, 25 minutes, whatever it is, before the game starts. To spend that much time, say 25 minutes with the manager. And I even in the clubhouse too, I just felt like he was letting guys do their thing. And especially as the season went on, I mean, he wasn't as strict or as tight. They're going to look back at like the Dodgers story where apparently, I don't remember who reported it, like Clayton Kershaw and some others went to front office and said, hey, because it sounded like Kapler was going to be the guy in LA. And they were like, hey, we're protesting if he's the guy. And I think Gabe Kapler is a very different person from back then. So they ended up going with Dave Roberts over there. But I think he's a very different person. I think he made a ton of adjustments. He's always open to criticism, whether it's from fans, whether it's from the front office. I love that he did the survey with members of the organization. Nobody does that. So I just think people were way too hard on him initially because he's progressive and forward thinking, but he's not a drill sergeant in there. He just has some progressive viewpoints. And if you want to be on board with them, that's great, but he's not hammering them down your throat on a daily basis. He's offering them and saying, hey, I look at things a little bit differently. Let me see what you think about this. But there are some guys that just want to do their thing. Perfect example. Wilson Ramos comes in. He operates a little bit differently. Some guys use a wristband for looking at pitches and plays and all that kind of stuff, right? And Wilson Ramos is just kind of like the old school, let me get back there. I got a big arm, all that. And, like, they let him do his thing. So I think that's a good example that if there's a veteran that wants to come in there and he's going to get paid more by the Phillies than anyone else, he's going to be fine, and Gabe's going to let him, as long as he thrives, Gabe's going to let him play and operate the way that he wants to. People need to relax a little bit on Gabe.
Scott Braun joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Again, you can check him out on all the coverage of the ALDS throughout MLB's network's coverage of the 2018 postseason. Visit MLBnetwork.com for your local channel lineups, your local channel listings. All right, so you got Cleveland, Houston, which I think is going to be an epic series. We'll save the Yankees for last, but give me handicap that series because, I mean, I love the pitching matchups. I love the fact that Houston's trying to defend. They want to get back to the World Series, win it again. You got Cleveland, which is a storied franchise. I mean, I just think we're in store for a fascinating and just really wonderful series.
Such talent in that series, too. I mean, I know Cleveland only won 86 games, whatever you want to call it, jaded. That was a really bad division, one of the worst we've seen in a while. Cleveland's a team that's built for the postseason. And you look at both sides. I mean, this is one of the series where obviously you would not be surprised if Cleveland upsets Houston, yet I still have Houston as the favorite. And I picked them to start the season to win the World Series. I still have them in my mind as a World Series favorite. The only thing I think that could be their downfall is the offense might be down a tick from last year. I mean, Carlos Correa was a huge deal for them last year. His back is a major problem. So let's see how he looks now with the extra rest again and see if he can at least – it's not going to be 100% for the rest of the season. At least if he can curb things and be – I mean, right now he's been a very below-average hitter since he came back from the disabled list. They can't afford that. At least average. I mean, he doesn't have to be the superstar for them because the pitching is much better than it was last year, like much, much, much better with Garrett Cole in that rotation. And then relief pitching-wise, I mean, I was looking – my buddy Mike Petriello, who writes for MLB.com, put together a list of their relief pitchers that didn't make their roster, which all of them would be on almost any other playoff roster. Hector Rondon, who was their closer for a lot of the year, Joe Smith, Chris Stavinsky, Peacock, Valdez. Those guys combined have a 3.40 ERA. He said, doing some advanced analytics, that their numbers were basically like Madison Bumgarner, David Price kind of numbers this year when you take those five. I know it's like we're putting a lot of things together, but my point is they had to make so many cuts just because they look at last year's 2017 roster and then look at their 2018 roster and how much pitching turnover. They have big time pitching out of their bullpen, and then of course in that starting rotation that they added. So that's what makes them special. The Indians have those 4 special starters that they've always been looking at and saying, wow, I mean, they can shut down any team in a postseason. And when I'm talking about Houston not being as in love with their offense as I was last year, like relying very heavily right now on someone like Tyler White, who wasn't really a factor for them last year, this is where Cleveland can thrive. Their bugaboo would be their bullpen, because Andrew Miller doesn't look the same.
Nope.
Cody Allen had a tough season, although he's been better lately. I love Brad Hand, but for Tito, I mean, after that, there's not much to rely on in the bullpen. Oliver Perez for a batter here and there, he's been good. Like, there's names that you're like, wait, these guys were shuffling all over the place, couldn't find a team, and then the Indians pick them up, and they've been helpful. So offense, though, for Cleveland should be better than it was last year. I mean, Lindor and Jose Ramirez didn't show up in those last 3 games of the DS against the Yankees last year, but you would expect them to be their superstar selves. And then Josh Donaldson's the X factor for me, because he looks healthy. So if he goes on a crazy run and he's got that chip on his shoulder, he can carry them to a World Series championship. So I'm with you. I mean, this is one of the best. This is a great series, and it's going to be overshadowed by what I'm doing a little bit here at Fenway.
Yeah, and we'll close with that. The Yankees and the Red Sox. And, again, you got to go all the way back, that memorable 2004 ALCS Yankees. Oh, my God. I'm still not over that, but whatever. That's a story for another day. You mentioned X Factors. I think the X Factor is, for the Yankees, I think it's Sanchez. And I think for Boston, you can make an argument it's Sale. But for Sanchez, I don't think – maybe he has his flashes where the bat maybe comes alive and he struggled, but the kid's still relatively young. But I think they're more wary of, okay, defensively, can you just be that solid pitcher and solid catcher? And we know the Yankees are going to rely on that offense from top to bottom in the home run ball. But I just think if they can shorten up the game and they can knock out some of these starting pitchers for the Boston Red Sox and get to their bullpen, I think they have a puncher's chance here. I really do.
So ready for this? I think the Yankees are the favorite, like by far. I mean, it's crazy to say it, but I think you look at momentum, you look at what works in the postseason, which is bullpen. Boston has gotten by for most of the season because they've excelled in other areas without much of a bridge from their starters to Craig Kimbrell. Everything's going to be determined really quickly, though, because if they fall in Game 1, then you have David Price Game 2 against the Yankees. The Yankees have crushed him, and then after that, the Yankees go home for 2 games. Yep. And the Yankees don't lose lately in the postseason at home. That place is rocking. So we're going to know everything really quickly, Rich. That's why I'm excited, because if Chris Sale's throwing 90 like he was in his last start, the Yankees are going to be licking their chops. Chris Sale has had some time to work on. They said it was just mechanical flaws with his extension. So if that's all true and he's right again and he can shut down the Yankees like he did earlier this season, totally different series. But if Chris Sale suddenly after the first few innings is getting touched up by the Yanks, we're going to look at this and go, oh my goodness, this is a really scary ball club, because I think the Red Sox are heavily relying on Chris Sale at the moment. Price pitched well in the second half of the year, but the Yankees aren't a good matchup for him. So for the Red Sox, so overall, it's Sale's health, and it's the bullpen for them, because you look at the names in that bullpen.
Yep.
I mean, there's not a lot of intimidation. There's not a lot of experience. So those are the 2 problems with Boston. The things you like, of course, are they're athletic. Defensively, they're great, especially in that outfield. They make contact. They have 2 superstar hitters in J.D. Martinez and Mookie Betts, there's no game plan against them. You just have to, cross your fingers and make sure you're accurate on every single pitch location, and also that you're switching things up. On the Yankees side, I think the problem for them is, we saw this in the wild card game. Defensively, they're a little shaky in that infield. Miguel Andujar, I really don't like at third base right now. I mean, he's been getting better, but he's still a well below average defender at third. So they're going to sub quickly with Echeverria, and I think you sacrifice the offense for the defense there. Luke Voigt also not the best first baseman, so that's where you'd have problems with them. But they have 5 closers. I mean, even if Britton, he gave up the homer the other night, if you're like, I don't trust Britton right now, you got 4 other guys.
That's right.
Just looked insane. He looked sick. So Jay Happ's pitched well against the Red Sox in the last few years in his career. So there's a lot to like with New York, and they're all healthy at the same time. Like, they had guys missing for most of the year, and usually that happens, but then you don't end up getting 1 or 2 of the guys back. Everybody's back at the same time. So it's a scary group. I think they're the favorite.
Wow, 7:32 can't come here fast enough for first pitch. I know you're ready to go. You will be covering and everyone can watch Scott cover the ALDS throughout MLB Network's coverage of the 2018 postseason. These guys do a fantastic job from top to bottom. Visit MLBnetwork.com for your local channel listings. Fantastic stuff as always. Like I said, I just got to wind you up and let you go. You're good to go. So, hey, enjoy.
Especially right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
Christmas time for you, my friend. So, hey, enjoy it. I always appreciate a couple moments, bud.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rich. Take care.
You got it. Scott Braun does a fantastic job.